You've seen Indian naval submarines in action. Have you ever been on one? Welcome to the Kursura Submarine Museum at RK Beach, Visakhapatnam. Hello, I am Commander Arun and I have served on board submarines for more than 20 years, including Kursura. This is South Asia's first submarine museum and amongst a handful in the world which allows you to see a naval legend up close. Behind every legend, there is a legacy. Kursura's began when she was commissioned as the fourth of the 8 Foxtrot class submarines by Commander Arun Odito at Riga, in the erstwhile Soviet Union in December 1969. Less than 2 years later, in December 1971, she was on war patrol off Karachi. After 31 years of service, Kursura was about to be decommissioned and headed for the scrapyard. But Vice Admiral Pasricha, the then Commander-in-Chief of the Eastern Naval Command, had other plans.
I thought this was a unique opportunity for our countrymen to see and experience being on a submarine. So I decided to put Kursura on land. However, it was easier said than done.
The first step was to identify the right spot for hauling the submarine as close to the beach as possible with the right gradient. Imagine hauling a 1,400-ton submarine onto the beach and placing it on concrete platforms. It required a great deal of effort and planning. Commander Deepak Sahu, officer in charge, Submarine Maintenance Unit, spearheaded the project. We also owe a lot to Professor Sambandhan, who was involved in this project from drawings till completion.
Today, Kursura is one of Visakhapatnam's leading tourist attractions and receives more than 500,000 visitors every year. Kursura is 12 meters high and 91.3 meters long. At the back are 3 propellers which helped drive the boat. The rudder here helped the submarine turn left or right. These planes were used to change the submarine's depth. Kursura could go down to a depth of more than 250 meters. That's like going down 80 floors of a building. The stabilizers here were used to maintain the submarine at a particular depth. Come, let's go ahead. We are almost at the center of the submarine now. Kursura had an internal pressure hull which was surrounded by 10 ballast tanks, like this one, which were used to dive and surface the boat. Kursura has 6 torpedo tubes, 3 on the left or port side and 3 on the right or starboard side. This is the main sonar which was used to listen out underwater. And here is one of the 448 batteries used to propel the submarine underwater. Batteries? Well, I'll tell you why later. You see, these were electric vehicles much ahead of their time. When operational, Kursura carried a crew of 75. Come, let's step up and dive in. Welcome on board. We are now in the forward part of the submarine called the fore ends or torpedo room. You can see the 6 torpedo tubes behind me. Kursura could carry a total of 22 torpedoes, 6 in the tubes and 12 reloads. An electric motor was used to load the torpedoes. Once loaded, the tube's rear door was shut. Each tube had a firing lever. On the captain's order, the lever was pulled to launch the torpedo. We could also carry mines like these instead of torpedoes. Come, let's go to the second compartment. Wash basins. We have only 3. This here is the captain's cabin, the only man on board to have one for himself. Our operations were often secret and orders were opened only after diving. Diagonally opposite the captain's cabin is the sound or sonar room, our only window to the outside world. It's here that the sonar chief and his team would continuously listen out for underwater sounds and identify friend or foe. Once his watch was done, he would rest here on a bunk barely 2 feet wide. This is the officer's accommodation. The uniforms you see were disposed every 4 days. Watch closely. This uniform has no rank. The only one in the Navy not to have one. On the right here is the officer's wardroom. In port or on surface, the radio was a great source of entertainment and was relayed all over the boat.
This is All India Radio.
Besides being a dining room, this also doubled up as accommodation and, when necessary, an operation theatre. Interestingly, in 1988, Surgeon Commander Belubi performed an appendectomy on board INS Chakra, saving a sailor's life. All our submarines have undertaken various underwater operations, but this one was different. We are now in the control room, and this ladder here leads up to the conning tower, where the periscopes are located, and further up, the bridge. In harbour, this is how we entered the submarine. Here is the chart house, where the navigating officer and his team would chart the submarine's course, and during a torpedo firing, calculate the target's course, speed and range. The gyro compass repeater often doubled up as the captain's chair. The control room was the nerve center of the submarine. Orders for speed were given on these telegraphs. Do you remember the rudder that we saw outside? The rudder was operated using these levers by the helmsman. These levers controlled the planes of the submarine to make her surface or dive. This is the submarine's logbook. Every order given, response received, and action taken was duly logged. This was the submarine's black box. This is the diving and surfacing system. Using these manipulators, water was taken into the ballast tanks to make the submarine heavy and dive the boat. To surface the boat, these wheels were operated, which released high-pressure air into the ballast tanks to blow the water out. This is one of 2 gyro compasses on board. Underwater, the only way to know where we were heading. We are now entering the 4th compartment, and this is the wireless office. Submarines run silent in more ways than one. Messages were only received, rarely sent. This is where the secret code books were kept. And even today, on board warships, this remains one of the most restricted areas. Fresh food would last only for a few days, and after that, for weeks on end, it was only tinned rations. This is the submarine's galley, where our 2 cooks worked tirelessly to feed a crew of 75. They were the only ones permitted to bathe. This is the engine control room, from where the 3 diesel engines were started and monitored. The engine room is the boat's heart and lungs. Here is one of our powerful 6-cylinder 2000 horsepower engines, which were used to recharge our batteries. You must be wondering, why batteries? Well, the diesels require air, a precious commodity underwater. That's the reason why batteries propelled the submarine when dived. Every once in a while, the submarine came up near the surface to periscope depth, raised the slot mast, took in air to run the diesels and charge the batteries. When the submarine was underwater, we were breathing out carbon dioxide, food was being cooked, and the toilets were being used. The air was always foul and oxygen was low. So, at every battery charging, with the help of these powerful supply and exhaust blowers, the air in the compartments was refreshed. But when the engines and the blowers were running, the noise here was unbearable. Let's go to the motor room. 3 motors were used to drive the submarine's propellers. The direction of the motor was chosen in a very interesting manner: forward and reverse or astern. The speed of the motor was controlled using this wheel. We also had a slow-speed echo motor on board, which was used to conserve battery power and help the submarine to stay dived much longer. 3 wash basins, 2 toilets, 75 men. We are now in the last compartment, the aft ends. In the unlikely event of the submarine sinking, the only way out was to wear the EDA suit and escape through this hatch. It took 2 people to wear the EDA suit, and the last to leave was always the captain. We passed very comfortably through each compartment, but in reality, hatches like this separated them. Earlier, I had mentioned 22 torpedoes, but shown you only 18. There's a sting in the tail. Here are the 4 remaining torpedoes. The enemy couldn't get away so easily. Well, that brings us to the end of the tour. Come, let's surface. We may have come out of the submarine, but submariners never do. And neither did Admiral Audito. In 2021, his ashes were immersed in the sea next to his boat. This is not just a museum. It's a tribute to all those who dared to master the deep. Kursura must be the only submarine that is as famous on land as she was underwater. Seeing a submarine is one thing, experiencing it quite another. So, when are you coming?